Great. Hi, I'm going to talk about Lexicon.Community and smoke signal. I have been told that this presentation is a bit dense, so I'm going to go through about 65 slides. It's quick, it's 30 seconds a pop, don't worry. We're going to do questions and comments at the end, so until then, please enjoy each slide equally. So we're going to start with a little bit of pre-presentation housekeeping. I want to take a very quick moment and appreciate the fact that we're all here and able to do this. I feel so fortunate to work alongside so many smart people, and I don't have time to, oh, thanks. Brilliant. I appreciate you. Gratitude. I'm especially, oh, is this good? Nice. That is excellent. Thanks. Fantastic. I'm especially grateful and thankful to people like Boris and Brian and Tom and Rudy and Paul and Ted and the many other people who have contributed directly and indirectly to this community. Cool. I also want to stop and acknowledge that smoke signal borrows from language and concepts that originate from indigenous people. Colonialism is not a thing of the past. It is an ongoing thing and directly and indirectly affects us all. We would be remiss if we talked about growth without reflecting, acknowledging the past. And from previous talks, that's a lot of what we've been doing. Oh, more, perfect, that's great. This is not a bit, So, hi, I'm Nick. I've been in tech for a short while. I've worked in a bunch of different industries, EA and Blizzard, toys at Mattel, tech and social media at 6 Apart, LiveJournal, and Yahoo, and of course in the DevOps space at Datadog. I've also spent a lot of time in the AI ML CS space, both at previous companies and currently at GitHub, where I work on Copilot. I'm about 5'5", Caucasian, I have brown hair, I'm wearing a blue hoodie, I've got a bushy mustache and a septum ring. I'm standing behind an iPad in front of the screen. All of the slides and the content are going to be presided with notes. All of the images have alt text. If you need anything else to understand this presentation, please message Boris, myself, Ted, we'll get it to you. Great. All that aside. In the summer of 24, I launched Smoke Signal Events, an event and RSVP management application built on top of Ad Protocol. Today's talk is about what went into and came out of developing Smoke Signal. Smoke Signal was inspired by a lot of things. Oop, can't move away. But it really comes down to a question that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. How can communities outlive the platforms they use? Going further, how do independence and autonomy lead the design of tools and systems that communities use? How could we model products and services that are financially stable and also respect their users? And what safeguards can we put in place to ensure people can exercise choice and use the services they want? We're asking all of those questions because we've all had experiences with this problem, walled gardens. I'm going to step through and go through some examples. This isn't a name and shame per se, but I think it's important to talk about them candidly. And also, not all of these examples are of intentional harm, but the reason that they're listed together is because the end result is the same. So, I'm going to start with one that a lot of people are familiar with. Meetup started as a way to create communities, emphasizing group events. In 2017, it was acquired by WeWork. There are a lot of really great articles about WeWork, and I've had a docudrama on my to-watch list for a little while now. Unfortunately, the transition has been really rough on communities at Meetup, and their business decisions have driven a lot of people away. Later in 2020, there was another sale, and then again in 22 to Bending Spoons, the company that also acquired Evernote that same year. I think both Meetup and Evernote have a similar story. They've both suffered from the corporate product death cycle. The lesson we've learned from this is that websites come and go, and sometimes you're too close to recognize their slow decline. For a lot of communities, this was death by 1,000 cuts. This is what comes up most in my Oppo feed of Meetup when people vent about it. In June of 24, they announced some pretty big price changes, and small communities, especially ones that are not-for-profit or just casual groups, can't and won't pay $300 a year. It's completely valid to say that Meetup needs to flex to cover the cost of operating, but there's still a pretty big disconnect. A 2022 study found that only 18% of US social media users were confident that Facebook protects their privacy and data. The people who I talk to who use Facebook still acknowledge that it's a trap, right? When asked asked why, the answer is usually along the lines of, well, it's how I keep up with my friends and family, or the events that I go to are listed there. And what's frustrating is that an organizer and community leader, I found Facebook necessary for bringing awareness to my events. It was the #1 source of people, only second to meetup.com, after it started to decline. On Facebook, you are the product and the prey. You leave a trail of posts, comments, and likes wherever you go. Meta tags and labels you like game, and advertisers follow your scent. Your information and attention is hunted, and a lot of money is made in the process. If you haven't read this piece by Neil Dash, I strongly encourage you to do so. The purpose of a system is what it does. Facebook has been thoughtfully and intentionally designed to make it really difficult to leave. They manipulate your attention and relationships to feel necessary. Some people find it prohibitively difficult, citing harm to their personal and professional relationships and even financial stability. Simply put, Facebook is implemented as designed. There's no, oops, we didn't mean to treat you as information cattle, or oops, we didn't mean to monetize your child's emotional well-being. It is doing exactly as it intends. Upcoming.org launched in 2003 as a social event calendar. I know, I'm so sorry. In the heyday of Web 2.0. It was scooped up by Yahoo in 2007 and ran for about 10 years, before Yahoo shut it down in 2013. Several years later, in 2017, it was brought back to life through crowdfunding. Money was raised, and the event archive was brought online, but excitement faded, and updates became fewer and further apart. The last major update was in June of 23 to fix an issue with sign-in. To this day, you can't use upcoming.org without a Twitter account, which is very, very unfortunate. So these aren't the only stories and examples. We're all here because we want community. There are a large number of people here who have put a lot of time, energy, and money into building communities and making tools to support them. And that is what led to Smoke Signal. Early attempts and prototypes actually started with ActivityPub. The Tavern and AP Events projects were implementations of groups, shared content, and event management. I spent a considerable amount of time working through actors, inboxes, interactions, even made some contributions to Mastodon to get a better feel how it would all work. Ultimately, those projects were shelved because I ran into a bunch of limitations. It wasn't a good fit for what I wanted to do. Activity streams is both the Fediverse's biggest strength and its greatest weakness. When any type can be anything, you end up with a lot of unofficial implementations that have their own quirks. And as a result, Mastodon and ActivityPub are effectively the same thing to most people. @Protocol was game-changing. I wrote an article about 9 months ago to capture some of my thoughts about why I wanted to use @Protocol for Smoke Signal. It does have some background on ActivityPub, and there are some lessons learned, but it emphasizes a key feature that is important to the story: user mobility. Identity ownership and mobility, data portability, and user choice all feed into the credible exit. And that really resonated with me as an alternative to the sword of Damocles mindset of web product development. If you love your users, you have to let them go. So we're going to turn to some things that made Smoke Signal possible through what @Protocol provides. Decentralized identifiers are a really interesting thing, and supporting both did method PLC and did method web was a really smart move. Handle resolution, did document resolution, verification keys, and service lists are all building blocks for enabling identity ownership and mobility. I've teased about the whole placeholder to public ledger of credentials rebrand and retcon, but I think that PLC directory is an incredibly potent tool. Paul said, if you're curious why everybody's username is domain, it's because everyone is essentially a website. This is spot on. @address, a human readable address, and that can be used by machines to cryptographically verify their data and where it is stored. My did document looks something like this. It lets services like Smoke Signal know what my identities are, where to store my data, and how to verify the authenticity of that data. Simply put, I'm known by the domain that I control, and I host my data where I choose. OAuth is employed in a really clever way. Originally, app passwords were supported to grant applications the ability to make API calls on behalf of users, and I'm proud to say that Smoke Signal was one of the first applications to really implement, and I've been spreading the good word ever since. The introduction of OAuth is huge because it does two really important things. The first It reduces the number of clicks that a user makes to log into an application or website. I wouldn't call OAuth less complex than app passwords, but the user-facing complexity, not having to go create an app password, figure out where to store it in a password manager, hopefully share it specifically and in a safe way with the application. All of those requirements are low with OAuth, and that leads to a safer and better user experience. Second, it cements identity ownership and portability. As a user, your PDS is your home base. It is where applications direct you to grant permissions, and it is the place where you enter your credentials. In action, this is pretty straightforward. When a user visits SmokeSignal, the login process begins with them entering the handle they want to log in with. SmokeSignal resolves that handle to their DID document and then goes through the auth server resolution and redirect process. The user is directed to their PDS. The user is directed to their PDS to complete authentication and then back to SmokeSignal with credentials. Big asterisk there. One thing you don't see in this process is OAuth service registration. And this is great for SmokeSignal and really everyone else, because when someone wants to authenticate and I've never seen their PDS before, that person doesn't have to wait for me, the operator, to go through a lengthy and time-consuming process to go register my app with their PDS to get a client ID in secret. It's great for users because whether they're self-hosted or on a mainline service provider like Blue Sky Social PBC, their identity is resolved and authenticated the same way. And there's no exceptions to that. So, lexicons. We're going to put a pin on that. Repositories. I touched on this earlier, but repositories are really important. They're listed in the DID document as at protocol personal data server, the PDS. They're important because they serve content consistently and in a way that proves authenticity. When someone creates an event on SmokeSignal, or any other app view tool or client can request that exact same content. Relays, closely related, are also essential in the atmosphere. So there are different types of relays, and they serve different purposes, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm referring to some stream of events and records that a client can connect to and receive at protocol records in a somewhat ordered fashion. With SmokeSignal, when someone creates an event and that event is stored in their PDS, it will eventually make its way to other app views and stream consumers that can store and index that record as they wish. SmokeSignal isn't the only producer and consumer of these events, and relays make interop a whole lot easier. App views don't have to have a full and complete picture of the network in order to process and support user data. Although feeds aren't a protocol feature per se, their implementation is a really interesting side effect of protocol design, but we're going to put a pin on that too. So, why at protocol? Because with it, we have a solid foundation of identity and the flow of information. Users can exercise choice. Records are structured with strong definitions in a way that allows them to be discovered. So, what about that credible exit thing from earlier? And don't get me wrong, I want to build really fun stuff, and I enjoy being up here, not gonna lie. I think SmokeSignal has value in and of itself. I also feel strongly that to practice what I preach about that, we need to really dig into portability. Using @protocol's platform's features to store SmokeSignal data on your PDS, it really isn't enough. So to illustrate, we're gonna go into some records. This is the first official event for SmokeSignal. It was a 1-year anniversary party. It's coming up this summer. I was feeling very optimistic. When you look at it, you can see that the structure and makeup is very specific to it. The type, mode, and status values all reference SmokeSignal NSIDs. There are some information like a status starts at, ends at, and so forth. It was a good starting point, but I think we can do better. This is where Lexicon.Community starts to fit in. Lexicon.Community doesn't own or manage SmokeSignal, but rather, I'm an individual that is a member of the Lexicon.Community organization. I leverage what Lexicon.Community produces to give SmokeSignal users a credible exit to leave my application if they want. The updated record for this event references SmokeSignal in the name and description only. The types are communally owned, they're influenced by existing standards, and went through a period of discussion before being released. So, Lexicon.Community helps answer that last question from earlier and adds a few more questions to the discussion. What safeguards can we put in place to ensure that people can exercise choice and use the services they want? How can we foster an environment of trust between individuals, organizations, and users? And how can we document and implement best practices in defining lexicons and working with developers using those lexicons? And that's the mission. The mission is twofold. First, to create an effective, active blueprint for collective ownership of lexicons in the atmosphere. Second, to build a stable and thoughtful lexicon that can be used by application, system, and SDK developers. Lexicon.Community is self-governed and is independent from Blue Sky Social PBC. Insert joke about no Caesars. The governance model is really simple. There's a technical steering committee made up of volunteers with different backgrounds, views, and goals. It has final authority over the project, including the technical direction, lexicon changes, project governance, contribution governance, and infrastructure. The work of Lexicon.Community starts with working groups. Working groups are made of vetted contributors that can collaborate on specific objectives. These objectives vary, but also include things like schema changes, managing infrastructure, and reforming governance. So, what have we been up to? A whole lot. When I started back in November, events were one of my first priorities with Smoke Signal, but it wasn't the first lexicon released. The first one actually was bookmarks, and that's by Ethan, somewhere in the audience. Hey, over there. We've been working on common types, including bookmarks, events, locations, and reactions, and we've also had a lot of really, really good discussion around versioning, profiles, attestation, traits, and a dozen or so other topics. Locations are also a really big one right now, and I'm excited about the direction that work is going in. Tom Sherman, his recent work on package management and lexicon resolution has also been folded in and is really promising. And I want to go into that a little bit more, because this is important. Lexicon resolution, as Paul referenced earlier, is a relatively recent addition to the app protocol spec and documentation, but with it, we can resolve and retrieve how lexicon schema definitions of record types, we can resolve them as they're encountered in the wild. So looking at that one example from earlier, this record has the type community lexicon calendar event. It is well formed, but if you found it on a relay or found it out in the wild, how would you validate it? Resolving this lexicon can give you the information you need to do so. So in action, it's pretty straightforward. When a record is encountered, its lexicon type is extracted. The value is split, reversed, and truncated into a DNS lookup that feels very similar to @handle resolution. The resulting DID and repository are used to get the lexicon schema for that type. It just works. All of the released Lexicon.Community lexicons can be resolved this way. And to demonstrate, if you want to use something like Tom Sherman's @proto browser, it performs lexicon resolution on demand. So viewing records using the Lexicon.Community type shows a nice big green checkbox, which makes everyone feel good. Cool. So come join the fun. Visit our website, Lexicon.Community, to browse our repositories and see the discussions taking place. We've adopted the contributor covenant and want to be a place where everyone feels welcome. The big caveat, and I just want to say it openly, acknowledges the fact that we reserve the right to deny tolerance to anyone who wants to promote intolerance, and that's not really up for debate. So what else? Smoke Signal was a great vehicle to experiment with ideas and has been the launching point for several. We're about halfway through, don't worry. So one experiment that came out of this was @ProtoCamp and Blue Badge. I think most people are familiar with what makes up a badge. Here's an example badge with the definition. You can see the name, type, and image fields. This is the Adventure Awaits badge earned on @proto.camp. This is what it looks like when a badge is awarded to someone. It references the badge that was awarded, includes some duplicate name, text, and image data for display purposes, and so forth. This flow and process is pretty straightforward. When you go to @proto.camp, you go through the OAuth process, an award record is created and written to your PDS. App views that speak the badge lexicon can display them, and everything's great. But there are a few small problems with this design. @ProtoCamp may only want to issue badges to people who earn them. @ProtoCamp also may not want users or other app views to tamper with the content. So what then? What if we introduce a signatures field to the field, a signatures field to the award? A signature is comprised of the original record, some metadata, and optional fields specific to issuance. The signature is generated with did method key, the same element that's listed in the @ProtoCamp did document. So now we're cooking, right? Now we have a structure that does two things. First, it says I've earned a badge. Neat. Second, it gives all the information needed to prove that I earned the badge. If I or another app view tamper with the record, the signature would be invalid. If I copied it to another repository, the signature would be invalid. The validation process uses the same cryptographic functions as validating any other record. No additional technology or lookup is necessary. And there are a lot of use cases here. For example, anyone can create an RSVP record. They're just your acknowledgement that you want to have the intention of going to or being interested in an event. So if all events are public and RSVPs are public, what about events that have limited seating or have a wait list? With a form of attestation, the event organizer can mark an RSVP as accepted by signing it and added the accepted at timestamp. Community content is another interesting use case. If two people co-author a post or piece of content, a record with two signatures could help demonstrate communal or joint ownership and attribution. There are also awards, badges, and certificates. Additional features like not before and not after timestamps or sibling records for revocation lookup can also be used for more advanced scenarios. As mentioned earlier, feeds are implemented in a way that respects identity, service, and data portability and ownership. What I'm interested in is how to take feeds as they're currently implemented and expand them so they can be used more broadly across app views and lexicons. So, feeds are kind of complicated. They involve handle resolution, service resolution, using PDSs to make signed requests and record hydration. That process deserves its own talk, and that's not going to go into the gory details. It's beyond the scope here. But how can this be applied to smoke signal? Doing so would be a really big deal for me. I, as the owner and operator of Smoke Signal, I don't want to implement and manage regional, thematic, or cultural event listings. I don't have the time or interest to curate the awesome list of events happening in big cities, nor do I want to be responsible for moderating them. Instead, I want to give organizers and curators the ability to do that themselves. Looking a couple slides back, what if we took the exact same process and applied it to Smoke Signal? If every user wants to subscribe to the raids feed on the Dayton Pokemon Club, they can do so through it. It will periodically refresh the feed, serve the associated records, and they can interact with the events just as they'd expect. When a user goes to subscribe to a feed, the feed definition can be more than just a name and description. It could include the types that are supported by that feed. It could also include parameters used to modify the feed's output. When a user subscribes to a feed, they could create an optional record that includes default options and configuration. Lastly, when a feed skeleton is returned, each request can include those parameters and arguments and the pagination cursor, along with just a list of strong refs for all of the records that it is satisfying. So, what if we treated location content the exact same way? If we already have the building blocks, right, to take an app view and have it query another app view, let's expand that to support bespoke services that query specific record types. On Smoke Signal, a user could configure multiple location services, and then these record sources are just building blocks that could enhance the user experience overall. For example, I live in Ohio and I like going to parks. Someone in my community could stand up a service that uses static data set or a curated list from the Foursquare open source places data set and list the parks and areas that I go to. When I go to create an event, I can open a locations search page or query for a park nearby, and then that information would be extracted and used so I can populate the event information. App views of all types, whether mobile applications or websites, would benefit from a process like this. It is the embodiment of user choice. All right, so looking back, even though my talk actually is about Smoke Signal, a lot of what I covered applies universally. Add Protocol covers a lot of topics, but everything sort of fits together. I shouldn't say sort of, it really does. The spec has only gotten better over time, and it is because of thoughtful discourse and intentional changes made to it. So there's a lot that I didn't get to talk about today: blobs, trust and safety, interop with external services, auth features, and so on. The list is really long. But the past year has been a pretty wild ride in the atmosphere, and I'm really excited for what everybody's building and contributing to what you're building. So to everybody who's Smoke Signal, contributed to Lexicon Community, or showing their support, thank you very much. Here's Here's my pet tax. We've got all the critters in our constellation: Mason, Lily, Lucy, Dallas, Cappuccino, and Nomi. Again, my name is Nick Gerakines. Find me online. That's it. Spicy bonus stuff. So private accounts will save lives. There's not really a debate on that. Every voice matters is a lie. I block people aggressively because it's just not adding value. Stop saying stupid shit on social media. Don't talk to cops and don't incriminate yourself. Section 230 keeps me up at night. That's probably my biggest concern. PLC directory needs to be either, distributed, peer-to-peer, anyway, I know, or outside of the US for a lot of reasons. And then, of course, talk is cheap. Intentions don't pay bills. Go put your money where your mouth is and show financial support. So.
Thank you very much, Nick. Yes, where can they come find you online as well? And please come on up if you've got questions. This is a lot of stuff, and I'm excited and interested to see where the conversation goes. I'm
also fully okay with answering some questions and then everyone going and eating, because I'm not more important than your hunger. That's all right.
We had two more.
Oh, fuck. Oh, shoot. Never mind. Go for it.
So really enjoyed hearing about the Lexicon.Community. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, as a developer who's kind of done a lot in the Golang space, one of the things that I've felt has been the most kind of useful piece of the Golang ecosystem has been having small interfaces to enable composition.
Absolutely.
How are you thinking about that in the Lexicon community? Because it looks like the types are single cast.
Yeah, I think that Golang interfaces or Rust traits, however you wanted to describe and define them, are a great fit and could possibly solve a lot of problems. So like, what if, for example, the Blue Sky app view was able to display any record that had a text field and a created at timestamp? That could possibly open up a lot of like interop between applications. So I would love to talk about that more. I think that'd be really fun and pretty neat.
And there is a Lexicon community discussion that I believe if folks are interested, please go vote for that, and we'll find a time and slot for that.
Hi, thank you. So the Lexicon community concept and the idea of different schemas that you can discover and navigate really reminded me very, very much of the concept of linked data and the semantic web.
Hey.
Probably because they're very closely related. And I am sad that lexicons are not RDF. Though I think they may be one-to-one semantically in such a way that you could kind of do it both ways. But anyway, I'm just curious. There's been a lot of thought with linked data about how you can make it sort of more automatically traversable. And I think you pointed out a ton of possibilities there, but also sort of possibilities that need to be implemented by all the apps that are involved.
Yep.
And so, yeah, just curious if you've thought about applying some of those techniques to kind of, even, semantic resolution or reasoning models or whatever to, automatically unify things.
Yeah. I think hydration of content is a really interesting idea that applies to more than just fulfilling feed requests, right? When you talk about hydrating a record at a machine level, you're talking about, performing the dependency lookup of the types and validating it. You're looking at any of the listed strong refs or embedded things and getting whatever additional metadata you need. And that process, although it's primarily used for display purposes, it can and does lead to the crawl and sprawl of URIs. I think it was actually really smart to make most of the URI references like flat URI references, and I don't think every reference within objects, records, actually needs to be like AT URIs. They can be all sorts of types, and we can even go beyond that. So yeah. Oh shit.
I was actually just going to ask a little bit about the signatures inside of the records.
Yeah.
You need new key material in the DID document to do that, right? Or are you reusing that? You're reusing the signing key that's being used for the repository?
I think it would be fantastic if there was a way to say this is a DID document modifying verification key versus a sort of utility key. But the general idea is that you're injecting a DID key, you have a private key reference, and then you're creating a signature based on that.
Okay. So sorry to make sure I'm clear on this. It's not that you are reusing the signing keys that currently exist in the DID document, or you're issuing a different key and distributing it differently?
I think for safety and security purposes, you should issue a new key and put it last in the list. It would also be great to be able to designate keys that are used for content signing and not DID method PLC identity management.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That should be a conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Hi. Yeah, the Lexicon Community project is really exciting to me. I'm just curious, as like a developer, like, what are there like known gaps to the project currently, or like is there like if I want to like, I guess what I mean is like if I want to jump in and contribute, or anyone else does, like what would be the best way to jump in and like help?
Yeah, right now today, come find me or Rudy or Ryan or Miss Boba. Tom's virtual, but he can be found in Discord. Really come ask us, start the conversation about what you're interested in doing, and we can probably identify some help wanted issues. Documentation is a huge thing. Localization and internationalization of lexicons in both their documentation and their use is sort of in an interesting direction to go in. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're going to take two more.
Sure.
Hi, Nick. Thank you very much for your talk. It was wonderful. This might be a very more pointed question, but how about what you were talking about with using the signatures and that? Do you think it would work with the currently, like, I work in IT support, so credentials are a big thing, like our CompTIA credentials. Is that something that we could work into using their verification system on the DIDs to show our badges?
So there is a verifiable credentials spec, and I think we need to have some more discussion as a community as to what the reasonable like dividing line there is, because there is some overlap. A lot of very smart people have put a lot of time, thought, and energy into verifiable credentials and what its use cases are. I think it would be really interesting to be able to, create new types that reference like functional and practical things that people are doing, and if that is, badges or certificates or some sort of other like proven thing, it's a great use case. If you wanted to turn this into a larger standard, I think that would be fantastic. It does have a lot of overlap. Yeah.
Last question.
If I get murdered walking out of this building and you all see it, please do talk to the cops. So I have a buddy who's working on a kind of an adjacent app. It's sort of event related.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, there may be ways in which he can build on top of @proto, and it would be good for the protocol. But I can't think of a way to tell him how it would be good for him. Well, I can think of one way, which is that he would get the love and appreciation of the community, and that would be helpful.
Yeah.
3 million accounts.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that only is good if you can find a way to, make a living. So as someone who is presumably spending a lot of time on this, do you have any thoughts on the monetization aspect?
Yeah.
Other than a donate link.
Yeah. So the pitch to other people is that if you're building an app that is creating and managing events and RSVPs, you benefit from like communal strength and mutual aid of data contribution and creation by other apps. So when talking about feeds and indexing, all of these relays and indexing, all of these are paved paths to allow other app developers to focus on the tools and features specific to their apps instead of all of this other stuff that is, well, what is an event and how is it defined and what are good examples that I can draw from. So I think that there's like a lot of value in that sort of shared knowledge space. And the, I mean, if we're going to talk about like legality and liability, you know, Smoke Signal doesn't host other people's events, and if someone creates an event on their PDS, like no one's going to knock on my door to be like, hey, who is that person and what is their content? I'll be like, fuck off, right? It's not my problem. There's a lot of benefit there, and it sort of pushes some user responsibility onto, it pushes some responsibility onto users, which is good, and depending on, you know, what you're building and where, that also is very valuable.
Thank you very much. Also, I'll remind everybody that murder is against the code of conduct. Please do not.
No murder.
And please
No
let
murder.
the staff know if you see anybody headed in that direction.
Yeah.
So,
Right.